Welcome to everyone. My name is Gregor Muir. I'm director of the ICA. As Maryam just kindly noted, the clan are all here. And I'm delighted to welcome Parviz Tanavoli on the occasion of his current retrospective at Wellesley College's Davis Museum in Massachusetts. Parviz is joined in conversation by art collector and editor Maryam Eisler and the co-curators of his retrospective, Dr. Shiva Balaghi, a visiting art history scholar at Brown University, and Lisa Fischman, director of the Davis Museum. Best known as a leader of modern Iranian sculpture, Parviz Tanavoli's expansive body of work includes paintings, printmaking, ceramics, rugs, and jewelry. In addition, Tanavoli is a highly regarded collector, scholar, and poet. Parviz lives between Tehran and Vancouver, and his work has been presented around the world, recently featuring in exhibitions at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the British Museum, Asia Society, and the Gray Art Gallery at New York University. His work is held, and Tate, forgive me, his work is held in numerous public and private collections, including here in London at the Tate Modern and the British Museum. Special thanks to Maryam Eisler for bringing us together with Parviz, Shiva, and Lisa. Can we give our speakers a round of applause, please?
Thank you so much, Gregor. I'm Lisa Fischman. I'm the director of the Davis Museum at Wellesley College, which is just a bit outside of Boston, west of Boston. We are here to share Parviz Tanavoli with all of you. We have the amazing opportunity on the occasion of his exhibition at the Davis to think about his impact and to think about the ways that his visibility exceeds our expectations. I would say that Parviz has been very visible here in the UK. He has work in private and institutional collections, some of which were very generous in lending to us. And so we're very lucky to have a community here, I think, of avid collectors who appreciate Parviz's work. And we're delighted to have the opportunity to come to ICA to speak about the exhibition. The exhibition at the Davis is a retrospective, the artist's first in the US and his first solo exhibition in almost 40 years. That is an extraordinary moment, and one that I think we'll hear more from Parviz about. That circumstance reflects larger forces, of course, political context that has allowed for Parviz's visibility in the Middle East, in Iran, in the UK, in Europe, and in Canada, but not so much in the US. And it means that the exhibition is something of an intervention into a small step, a small intervention into circumstances that are larger than any of us. The Davis is an academic museum, which means that its focus, its mission is in support of the educational mission of Wellesley College. It also means that we have a focus on creating platforms for interdisciplinarity, to think about artwork in contexts that invite new scholarship and invite students and faculty into research and programming and so on and so forth. We have a building designed by Rafael Mineo that houses our collection and gives a really amazing modern context for the exhibition. You'll see some photographs as they come up. The Davis then is, I think, the perfect place for this exhibition, but it is also really a kind of perfection, a kind of kismet, because of Maryam Eisler. Maryam Eisler and her husband Edward established the Eisler Fund at Wellesley College, which allows the Davis to work on projects, programs, exhibitions, and acquisitions around art of the Near, Middle, and Far East. It's an extraordinary initiative. It's unique in the world. It's an amazing moment for the Davis, where we act as a hub for creative thinking and engagement across swaths of the world that have really been not accessible to us. I really believe very strongly and like to say that Maryam has made the imaginable possible. Things that were only existent in the imagination now become reality at Wellesley because of her generosity. So Parviz's exhibition, this retrospective, is the first expression of this, of the Eisler Fund, an amazing way to kick off with a splash, the aims and goals and aspirations of this new project. I would like to invite you as part of our programming. We have a film series, we have student opportunities, we have all kinds of interesting events happening, along with a symposium on April 17th and 18th, and you are all very welcome. Art in Context will feature panels of the leading lights in the field who will come and speak at Wellesley about this sort of sense of the Middle East as an emerging market and the ways that we understand and expect certain kinds of action from the artists in the region. With that, I would like to introduce Maryam Eisler, who will take it from here.
I would keep it very short, but I wanted to state the reason why I was very passionate about getting involved with this project at my alma mater. I graduated from Wellesley in '89, and I'm currently a trustee on the board, and I felt that I could, in my position, do something to change perceptions, and that's where I come in. Of course, I love Parviz and I love his work, but I also think that it's a great vehicle to show a different side of our part of the world, and Iran certainly, given the current way that in the last 30 years we have been perceived and platformed from a media perspective and politically speaking around the world. And I always feel that where politics often fails, art and culture can certainly win. And I'm pleased to say that with this project and this initiative, and especially the exhibition that Shiva and Lisa have co-curated so beautifully, with, of course, the immense help and contribution of Parviz, that we have, to a certain extent, managed to possibly change a little bit perceptions of Iran and Iranian culture in the United States, which at this moment in time, I feel is very important to do. So that's it from me.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about how this exhibition came about. It was last spring. We were at Art Dubai, Lisa and Maryam and I, and someone showed us on their cell phone a video of the way some of Parviz's works were being treated in Tehran. Very disturbing treatment of his works by some of the local authorities there. And it stuck in our head. It was very deeply disturbing. And we talked about it amongst ourselves. And Lisa and I were in London at Frieze, and Lisa looked at me and said, we really should do something about Parviz Tanavoli. And being, an academic, I thought, yes, we should write an op-ed, or maybe an article. And Lisa said, no, we should have an exhibition. And being a museum director, she whipped out her cell phone and she's like, I can clear out some space, some gallery space in February. Do you think we can put on an exhibition by February? And I thought, 4 months. Yes, we can do a major retrospective of sculpture in 4 months. And so then we within hours, told Maryam Eisler about our brilliant idea, and she enthusiastically endorsed the idea that we could actually do this. So that's how the show came about. And it ended up being over 180 works of Parviz Tanavoli's, representing all 6 decades of his career. It was not easy to source the works. At one point, we thought we would call the show Heech, as in we have nothing to show, and maybe he would do like a Marino kind of performance. But what really made the difference was when Parviz himself opened up his private collection. And actually, most of the works that are in the show have never before been seen because they are his own personal pieces. And when Lisa and I pored over the works that we had and we sat down and thought about how to put together the exhibition, we decided to organize it thematically and chronologically. So we wanted people to get a sense of all of the media that he works in, even though he's known primarily as a sculptor. So there's a historical nook where you can see his work from the 50s and 60s. There's a section where you can see the works on paper and the smaller sculptures and his jewelry. But the main gallery space, about 4,000 square feet, is given to something like a sculpture garden. And very early on, Lisa had this vision of a Heech garden. So the center of the gallery is a Heech garden, different Heeches made in different material from different periods. And then around that, you have this, other thematic sculpture gardens, the poets, the Farhads, the lovers. So that kind of gives you a sense, and as you go through the pictures, you can kind of get a feel for how we curatorially organized. So given this, I wanted to pose the first question to Parviz. Parviz said to me when we were talking on the phone just the week before the exhibition that he'd moved to Canada 25 years ago and that he'd waited for 25 years for someone to open the doors, and that this exhibition had opened the doors for him. So when he and I were going through the exhibition with Lisa and Maryam the first time he saw it, I asked him then, I said, how does it feel to see 60 years of your work exhibited in this way?
Well, hard to express it, but anyway, it was a great surprise. I mean, I'm not talking about my works. I know them from memory. But the display, the arrangement, the curatorial job was so beautiful that I was really touched by it. I mean, for a long time, I hadn't seen all my work under the same roof. I hadn't seen my different groups of work, chronologically or thematically, I hadn't seen them together. And this gave me a chance to see them again and to review them. And for me, it was something quite new. These three ladies, I mean, they had done a great job. In my absence, I mean, they did it all themselves, they figured it all themselves, and at the end, I was amazingly happy to see it. I was worried at the beginning. It's not easy to display so many works together and then make it meaningful and make it easy for the viewer to watch it, to see it, but they managed to do it, and they did it lovely.
I thought I would ask a question about Farhad. I thought perhaps you could tell the story of Farhad and talk about the influence of this this poetical figure in your work and in your life.
Very good. Okay. Since I was studying in Italy, I was also thinking about my own heritage. I knew I am not descendant of Italian culture. I cannot become another Michelangelo, another Canova, or Marino Marini, and I wasn't aiming for it either. And but in Iran, there weren't anyone for me to be my model, to look after. And the only sculptor that is heard of is a legendary man who appears as a lover, who falls in love with the beloved of king in the 7th century during the Sasanian period before the Islam. And he was a sculptor, but nothing remains from him, of course. It's all legend. But the story alone, it was so beautiful that he was asked, the kings liked both his beloved and liked the sculptor of the court, and he didn't want to get rid of either of them. And so to make Farhad, he gave Farhad an impossible job in order to send him far from the court and from Shirin, and said, okay, if you carve the mountain and open a passage or tunnel, so my army can go through this, you can have the hand of Shirin. And Farhad accepted it and went there and worked day and night and carved the mountain by his axe. And when the news reached the king that soon the job is going to be accomplished, he thought over and consulted with courtier, and they said the best is we send a message and said that Shirin is dead. And upon hearing the news of death of Shirin, Farhad fell and died. So that was the end of sculpting Iran, because Some years later, Iran was invaded by the Arabs, converted into Islam. Sculpture was prohibited. And then there was no sign of sculpture for 14 centuries. So it was an ideal model for me to have Farhad as my master and as my model. And so from very beginning, from 57, 58, all the sculptures I made, I named them Farhad, the mountain carver, or sometimes I call them poets. And up to today, Farhad is still is very visible in my show, and they have a corner of my Farhad pieces.
Since we're talking about thematics in your work, why don't we concentrate on a theme that has been very central to your work, and that is the theme of the heat in Persian, which, for those of you who don't speak Persian, it is the letter H, but it also is the word which signifies nothingness. Now, nothingness, as you all know, has been a concept which has been very present in Iranian and Persian tradition through the poetry of Rumi, Khayyam, Hafiz, but also it is a concept which is universal, a philosophical concept which has been universal, and you in particular have often referred to Jean-Paul Sartre and his nothingness. And I'm also pleased to say that this year, in February, you celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Hijj. So would you care to tell us a little bit about the Hijj?
Yes, it was in mid-60s that I went back to Iran. I was quite disappointed. I went back from the States. I was in the States prior to that 3 years, and it was State was America. The art was flourishing. The pop artists popped out, and so much was happening. And then going back to Iran, it was not the same thing. You know, the art galleries were showing the rather imitational art or flowery arts and pretty arts, and I decided to stop making things and to stop making things, what it means to make nothing. And everybody else was making something. I decided to make nothing. And it took me some time to come up with some idea, how do you make nothing? And so the answer was Hijj. It was just to make the Hijj the way it is. I mean, I gave a dimension to the word Hijj, the way it was. And I exhibited it, and I didn't realize that it's going to have a long life. But it became so popular, people were so attracted to it, that practically it's 50 years anniversary, I'm still doing it. And now, of course, I wasn't the first one to make nothing. I mean, this goes back to Iranian poetry, Iranian literature. Great poets in Iran, Rumi, Hafiz, Khayyam, they talk about nothingness. What is nothingness? They always question it, that don't underestimate nothing. Nothingness is as important as thingness, as what things and nothings, they are like day and night. They are complementary to each other, and you cannot neglect one for the other. Or, you have to realize it. And Hafiz has a poem, it's a very serious poem. He says, you who are lesser than nothing, don't mess up with nothing. I mean, so takes nothingness seriously. And so all of this, of course, at the time wasn't that inspired me, but I had my own ideas. But then again, this business of nothingness always occupied the mind of the philosophers out in the West too, and not the artists. I think the first time the Western artists came to the concept of nothingness were early 20th century, probably the second decade of the century, that they tried to give importance to unimportant things, to objects that were not considered and not looked at. And that was just the very beginning of, Dadaist, Marcel Duchamp and all of that. We don't want to get into that. But then later, of course, with the beginning of minimalism in the 60s, I think many artists, it become universal, it become viral, and everywhere artists try to minimize, to make, to get to nothingness. And nevertheless, the nothingness of mine or those of the Iranian poets, they are not nagging anything. They are not. Negativizing anything. They are positive, they are friendly, they are nothingness of friendship, of love, those of the Iran, and the same one. So my hitches also, I decided to make them nice, to pliable, beautiful, and gave the shape of the figure as nice as I could. I polished them. I wanted that people like the figure the way they are. And that is how it's been living long life.
Let's see. I think that it was Shiva who said that had you never made a sculpture, had you never made a work of art, you would have had an enormous impact in all of the other roles that you have held as a scholar, as a poet, as an educator. I wondered if you could speak to us a little bit about your roles as a scholar and as an educator, and particularly in these areas related to cultural production that you've been so lovingly documenting.
Well, I mean, I follow the time and the circumstances. I didn't aim to become a scholar, but you know, when I was collecting, I was collecting unknown objects. I didn't like the known object. Not that I didn't like, they were known and there was nothing to say about it. I collected the kind of objects that they were unknown to, and nobody knew about them. For instance, my first collection was locks, padlocks, and nobody thinks about padlocks as artwork or artifacts, but I found that they were made beautifully and artistically, and they were very creative. And to me, it was part of our sculptural work, our sculptural history. The figural sculpture was prohibited, but other three-dimensional art was not prohibited. So Iranians found a way that expressed themselves in three-dimensionality, but in useful objects, in daily life objects, architectural details, doorknobs, I mean, incense burner, ceramics, and all sorts of things. And since there wasn't anybody to write about them, I had to write myself, and then that was not easy because I had to learn more about it. And for instance, when the Smithsonian Institution asked to show my locks in the States, and they also asked me to write about this. They said, we don't have anybody to write about it, and I had to go travel around with the country, find the last generation of locksmiths in the villages, and they were still making handmade locks because the two-key lock or the fabric locks still hadn't reached the villages and the tribal areas. And I met them, and I had a great time talking to them, filming them, picturing them, and so I gained some knowledge, and that's how I began. And the same with my other collection, with my lion racks, with my pictorial rack, because they were unknown, because there were nothing written about them, I had to do it myself, and I'm happy I did it. Then, of course, the revolution came. At the time of revolution, the Iran-Iraq war began too, and there was no fuel, no gas, no power, no material, and I didn't want to sit down home and do nothing. And I mean, of course, I was always doing nothing, but I decided to get going, and I went to learning more about Iran, to all the tribal areas or the villages, and visiting the remote areas, the tribal people, their weavings, their products, and so they brought me some knowledge altogether, and this knowledge the 10 years of the 10 years of the revolution actually became very fundamental for me. I learned a lot more about my country than I ever knew before.
I just wanted to follow up on that. About the lions. You mentioned the lion rugs, and we weren't able to show any of the rugs in the US because of the sanctions, but we did create a small lion niche, a little spot, and the lion seemed so special, and I wondered if you could speak about that a bit.
Yes, the lion is another story that I have to tell you. I first bought a lion rug in Shiraz and Persepolis festivals when I was there visiting Shiraz Persepolis Festival. You probably have heard about it. Anyway, it was in '68. I was in Shiraz Bazaar. I saw a lion rug for the first time in my life, and I couldn't believe it. It was like it was made by a mature artist, and so powerful and so different than other traditional rugs. But accidentally and luckily, this brought another lion rug on my path, and I managed to buy half a dozen of lion rugs in less than a month. And this opened a new door to me. I decided to learn more about the lions and the lion rugs, and I figured out that the lion has a long history in Iran. You know, the Persian lion, which the last one went out of extinct, was seen about 50 and some years ago. That was in the south of Iran, and in all history of Iran, in poetry of Iran, lions is mentioned, and kings always went lion hunting, and so it was an animal that it was interwoven with Iranian culture, and I managed to get a good collection of lion rugs, which were exhibited everywhere, also in this country at Barbican centers in the 80s, and in Edinburgh in the mid-80s and so forth. But nevertheless, the idea of lions grew on me, and I decided I have to have a contribution myself. And I mean, when I was traveling, visiting all these lovely women, weaving lion rugs and all of that, and talking about it, I decided that I want to have my own lion rugs too. And I made some lion rugs. I asked the weavers to do my drawings into the rugs, and it took, of course, a long time before they managed to do it, but they did it, and they did it beautifully. And I hope this year or next year we're going to have a lion show in London, and it's the work of last 40 or 50 years of mine in collaboration with the other craftsmen, other weavers, and other, other fields who I work with to create these lion rugs. And the lion, of course, no longer exists. It's one of the two big mammals that died of tiger and lion now no longer exists in Iran. And we want to draw the attention of the outside world and also Iranians that the other two big mammals that exist, leopard and the other, that they take good care of it, because they may go out of extinct too. And I decided, this is something that can draw the attention of the outsiders to the big mammals of Iran.
We just ended on the lion section. That was well timed. So.
Yes, that is one of them.
So as you know, Parviz, I'm a cultural historian, and I was thinking as we were looking at the exhibition that there's going to be a 19-year-old young woman, because Wellesley is an all-women's college, sort of, right? Some debate about gender issues going on at Wellesley, so insider reference there. But that a young 19-year-old woman is going to come and see the exhibition. And Madeleine Albright went to Wellesley, Hillary Clinton went to Wellesley. So one young girl is going to be stimulated by this particular exhibition. It strikes me as, in some ways, it's almost like a history of Iran in the second half of the 20th century, your work. Embedded in your work are so many aspects of Iranian popular culture and Iranian history. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you feel about that notion of your art kind of representing an alternative history of Iran.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, because my art really has roots in Iranian culture, and I have never regretted to do so. And although I am aware of what's happening in the world, I follow up the contemporary art and all of that, and sometimes I even like it. But my art is definitely a reflection of the art of my country, of the heritage of Iran. And there is room for not only me, hundreds more people like me to reflect that, because it was ignored for at least last 2 centuries or last century. The contemporary Iranian artists, modernists, they mostly followed the Western art. They didn't look into their own heritage. And luckily, the new generation, the younger generation, are looking into it, and they're inspiring from our own heritage. And it can be, art can be contemporary. It doesn't have to be always followed other arts, but it can be rooted to their own native land. It doesn't matter. It can become contemporary too. Anyway, what Shiva says, it's very true, because Iranians relate with my art much easier than Westerners, of course, because the lack of knowledge and the lack of communication. And now the show we had in Wellesley at Davis Museum, just a few lectures and the films that go and symposium is going to help the Westerners. And the interviews, we had lots of interviews on television, radio, and on newspapers. I think it will open up their eyes, they open a new door to them, and there is interest. It's not their interest. You just have to show the way, how to look at it.
So now I'm going to play devil's advocate. Yes, your art is highly rooted in Iranian culture. There's no doubt about it. But by the same token, I would argue that it fits just as easily in the Western canon or universal canon of art. And as an example, for instance, we have a Tate representative sitting here, Vasilis. In September, October, the Tate is holding a show called The World Goes Pop, and your work is heavily featured in that show. So it'd be interesting, I think, for the audience to find out your opinions about how you fit so easily in both worlds.
I don't know. The others figured it out. I don't know how do I fit, but I'm very happy to hear that, because I never imitated. I think the past art is the past art. It can be inspirational, but it should not be imitated. And that's maybe one of the reasons. And then also I believe in the whole world is the same, is connected. It's not separated by borders. I mean, concepts are universal. Love is universal everywhere. Mother and child is universal. And so what humans share universally is shared by artists everywhere is the same. But the way they express it, of course, is different. An African artist shows their love different than an American, than an Australian or an Iranian. But nevertheless, I think if we consider the artist a reflection of the time, the mirror of his own or her own time, then there shouldn't be any problem of understanding art everywhere. The art of Iran can be understood in the States, or they were vice versa too.
Well, I think, like the best work from anywhere, from any origin, your work is multivalent, and you can read references that are specific to Iranian culture and specific to Iranian history. And you can see references materially, technically, formally, that speak to a kind of modern language that is also familiar and somewhat universal. And I'm interested in that because I think that people can respond immediately to the beauty of the work when they come into the gallery and they see this amazing array. But they also then have the opportunity to learn more. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your role as an educator, as a teacher of the several generations of next artists in Iran and how that has been.
Yes, yes. I think in a way I was lucky because there was no one in the market when I became a sculptor. And so they hired me. I was the only one. And I became the first sculptor teacher at Tehran University and other college that they had the sculpture courses. I was given it. No, if there were other people, probably they wouldn't have chosen me. Anyway, there weren't that many sculptors in those days, but today there are thousands of sculptors. I myself have trained at least somebody has counted it, there are 600 sculptors during my lifetime, either at Tehran University or at the College of Decorative Arts, which I taught for 2 years, and then in the last 10, 15 years, which I give courses, sculpture once a week maybe, not too many, and youngsters are dying for it. They really, when I give a course, I ask for 20 people for a class of 20, 200, 300 sign up, they want to become. The reason is Iran is empty of sculpture. Iran, it was empty, it was void for 14 centuries, and now all these new cities, public places, parks, they need a sculpture. They realize that. So there is demand for a sculpture, and that's why sculpting is flourishing. And I'm very happy to witness all of that. I mean, within the span of 50 years or 40 years, it has gone so far that it's unimaginable.
I would like, before passing it on to the floor to questions and answers, I would like to actually finish on a positive note in the sense that we all feel that it might be the beginning, a new spring possibly, of openness or a certain degree of dialogue, especially in the United States. And we were all very enthusiastically, touched by the fact that in this year alone, Wellesley College, through the Davis Museum, spearheaded a new spring of Iranian contemporary art in the United States with Parviz Tanavoli's show at the Davis, but that this was actually soon followed by Munir Farmayan at the Guggenheim, Shirin Neshat at the Hirshhorn, and we just found out that there's going to be Ramin and Rukni Harizadeh at the ICA in Boston at the end of the year. So it's a good time, and let it be filled with hope.
So shall we take questions from the floor?
Can you maybe say a few words about the influence of Mrs. Ibe Grey in creating, first in discovering you, putting some artists together, and also encouraging sculpture? I understood, but you have to correct me if she didn't.
Yes, of course, there is a lot. I didn't even mention it. There wasn't time. But I met Ibe Grey, an American lady, a widow who, after the death of her husband, came to Iran in 1960. And accidentally, I ran into her. I met her. She came and visited my studio, and she bought a couple of my works. And this was the beginning of a long friendship. And gradually, she became very interested in the art of Iran and then also art of the Middle East. And she accumulated the biggest collection out of Iran, of Iranian art. Before she died, she gave it to the New York University Grey Art Gallery. Ibe Grey invited me to Minneapolis in 1961 for 6 months to be a visiting artist. Of course, I accepted it right away, although I had a good position at Tehran University teaching there. I gave it up and went to the States. I thought that's a good opportunity for me to learn more about the American art. And I went there, and after 6 months, I was hired as an instructor at Minneapolis College of Art and Design for another 2 years. And this length of time built up our friendship deeper and deeper. And even when I returned to Iran, Ibe Grey didn't get, our connection continued, and she came every year or every other year. She visited me in Iran, and we went to artist studios, and we bought artwork for her collections. And any time I had an exhibition anywhere in the States or in Iran, Ibe came and bought the first 1 or 2 pieces, and those, of course, now are all at the Grey Art Gallery and are kept in good condition. Not all in good condition, but they are there, and hopefully will be there.
Actually, a piece of anecdote for you, Rose. When this exhibition came about and the Financial Times did a full-page article on Parviz, Lisa received a fabulous letter from this lady by the name of Julia, right?
Jane.
Rubin, who was Ibe's friend, and they traveled Iran together, and she photographed. A lot of the archival pictures that you see of Parviz with Ibe are taken by Jane. So Jane had lost contact completely with Parviz and reconnected via the show. So it's a lovely story.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit more. I taught at NYU for a decade, and it was in organizing a show of the Grey Art Gallery's work in 2002 that I got to meet Parviz. And the Grey collection is a very interesting collection. Ibe Grey went to Iran. By then, Parviz had already studied sculpture and was already a working artist. So she met Parviz at an exhibition that Parviz had actually organized at Banque Saderat. And they developed this in her book. She often refers to Parviz as like my son. And they developed this very symbiotic relationship where on the one hand, Ibe Grey helped support the building of a kiln and a foundry in Tehran,
That's
which
right.
Parviz used at the University of Tehran for his own work and his students' work. On the other hand, Parviz really, in effect, curated the Grey's collection of Iranian art, which is the largest collection of modern Iranian art held outside of Iran. It's about 250 works. So I think that aspect of Parviz's contribution, the curatorial aspect, hasn't been fully understood. And between 1962 and 1965, Ibe Grey helped organize it, but Parviz curated it, the first ever show of Iranian contemporary art in the United States. And Parviz literally rolled up 50 works of art and personally carried them over the course of 3 years all across America and would give lectures about Iranian art. And it showed in Kansas, it showed in Ohio,
Chicago,
yeah. Washington State, all over. So they had this relationship between the two of them where together they really helped develop knowledge about Iranian contemporary art. And in some ways, Americans in the 60s had more access to Iranian art than Americans do now, and that's part of the corrective of this show.
Thank you. My question was to ask if the H is a stylized H, and has it changed throughout your art career, or did you invent your own typography? And just from looking at your art from an outsider point of view, it reminds me a lot of Jean Miro, and I wonder, like, if your H's are becoming more abstract as you've progressed. And at the end of his life, Jean Miro even had a line to finish it. And just as a side point, just looking at the Contemporary Art Museum in Tehran, it looks almost like a spitting image of the Barcelona Jean Miro Museum, more or less, I don't know. So, did you get my question about the H?
What's the question?
The question is, has the shape of the Heech changed throughout?
Oh no, how can it be changed? Heech is Heech. I mean, I want it to be Heech. No, it couldn't change. But I mean, like human being, I mean, not today human being, of course, you can do anything with it, but we're talking about the human being with its proportion, Roman time, Greek time, Renaissance time. It remained always the same, but in various movements, various positions. Heech also can be in various positions, various movements. And also, it's so pliable, it can be set on a chair or with a table or be in a cage on a wall. And this figure is very elastic and can adapt itself, or himself or herself. Somebody asked me, is he a female or a male? I don't know. Sometimes for me it's a female, and sometimes it's a male. So it's hard for me to decide. When I make a hitch, I wanted to make it, beautify it. I think of the Venus. We never had a symbol of beauty in Iran. I mean, during the Islamic period. Prior to that, we did. And so, to me, hitch can also be a symbol of a beauty, either a man or a woman.
If I may, I have two questions. One is, in what way do you think your art is different today, having been influenced, or maybe not at all, by having lived abroad for this long? And my second question is, for somebody who's achieved so much, what aspirations do you still have for your work?
Oh, there is no end to that. Aspirations are longer than my capacity. I'm always behind, about 10 years behind. Anyway, if I understood right your question in the beginning and to the present, I think to me it hasn't changed that much. From very beginning I had a few themes, and I'm still with those themes. But of course they evolve. They are not the same thing. They change their proportion, their texture, and their finishing, and they keep evolving. I mean, I've made 50 years I've been doing hitches, but they are not repetition. They are not like Lucio Fontano's cuts. I mean, okay, they are beautiful. I don't object that. But the hitches are not like that.
I wanted to just add to that, Siar Mirjani, who's a beloved artist, and he and Parviz were very close because there was this moment in the 60s when Marco Gregorian and Siar Mirjani and Parviz Tanavoli all lived in Minneapolis, of all places. And they naturally spent a lot of time together because it was cold, so what are they going to do? But Siar has written that even at that point, you know, Parviz had already studied in several Italian sculpture institutions, but Siar observed that Parviz made sculpture the Iranian way. That even though he's Western trained, you know, there was this like deliberate, perhaps aesthetic, you know, if you want to talk about that, like your choice to make art not only about Iran, but your method is very Iranian.
Well, you see, technically, I couldn't do much when I was much younger. When I was a student, I was under influence of my teacher, Marino Marini, for instance. I made my figures intense, like Marini's horses and riders and so forth. But my themes, at least, were mine. They weren't Italian, they were Iranian themes. I made Farhad the mountain carver, poets and beloveds and so forth and so on. But that's why I wasn't happy, because I wanted also change the anatomy of my art. I want to make a new anatomy, create a new anatomy for Iranian sculpture, a new lexicon, a new vocabulary. And that wasn't easy, because I had to start from scratch. And so today, if you look at it, it was gradually, it was built up. It came to shape, some shape that eventually I managed to express myself with the same themes, but in different shapes and different formats and different proportions and different anatomy. And this is definitely my anatomy. It's not Mediterranean, it's not Roman, it's not Greek. It's the anatomy that I managed to build it up.
We are talking a lot about your sculptures, and we know that you painted. Is that because you see yourself more as a sculptor, or because it's the natural evolution or progression of your work as a painter? You wanted to see more things more in a 3D dimension rather than on a flat canvas?
Well, I really started painting because I needed to eat better. And there was a restaurant in Milan run by three sisters, nice Christian, good-hearted Christian, and they gave artists free food in exchange of their paintings. And so a friend of mine, I asked them whether they accept the sculpture. They said, no sculpture, no, niente scultura, pittura. So I went and bought some, canvas and oil paint and so forth. And I did the scrambled. I don't know what I did. I did some stupid paintings. And they gave me, they liked it. And they gave me you can come here and eat for 15 days for free. And that's how I began to become painting, and I followed it up. But the reason I made those early paintings, and especially in Minneapolis, I made a lot of paintings, is because when the school was closed, I'm very hyper. I didn't know what to do with myself. So I decided when the school is closed, I cannot use the studio, the workshop, the tools there in the workshop. I went home and started to paint, and bought some oil and paint and canvas and so forth, and did those paintings. I don't know really the reason. I think one calls for the other. And this morning also, Tate was making a small film on me. I told them that really it's like your body and the vitamin. Sometimes your body needs some other vitamins, some other foods that you're hungry for it and you want to have it because your body asks you to have it, not your brain, not your mind. And painting and sculpture to me is like that. Sometimes I'm so hungry for color. And also in a sculpture, you cannot make mistake. You have to be certain what you are making. And the kind of sculpture I make, and it's very costly if you make a mistake. But painting is easy. Painting, to me, painters, I think, are blessed, and they are so lucky. I could have produced 10 times more than any painter if I was painter. And because you can, if you don't like it, you go over it and change it. And this can go on and on and on. And of course, I don't say it's easier or harder than one or the other, but there are two different things.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. It seems to me that a lot of your explorations come from a kind of intense desire and curiosity to research. And we've seen in some of the images that you are doing field research in tribal cultures or traditional ways of working. And I'm aware of the fact that you have been extremely inspired by architectural elements, the city of Tehran, but also the way that workshops are functioning and the way that, the kind of the reality of things is being produced. And my question is what does trigger your imagination and your creativity now? What are you researching at the moment that might come?
When you do something for 50 years or so, you don't look for it. And automatically it comes. And I said, I'm behind one idea brings another. I don't have any problem now for producing work. I can continue. Maybe I did in the past because I had different inspirations from different sources. I went to Copper Bazaar. I saw all these beautiful shapes the coppersmiths were making, bowls and pots and pans. And I got ideas. Well, this can be shaped into shape of sculpture. And some of the sculptures, you see, they are totemical. You see it here. They are in collaboration with the coppersmith. I asked them to do the same bowl and pot that they were making for themselves, or that make it double, and I just changed some of the proportion, and I assembled them and turned them into art. And my rug weaving is the same, and all other inspiration, architectural inspiration, has been the same. So that very moment that inspiration comes, that's only 1 second. The rest of it is our labor to realize it, to execute it. It's not anymore that much creative, but that 1 second is whatever it is, whenever it comes. That's, I think, the most precious time of any artist's life.
Okay, I think we're going to end things there. But just to say, enormous thanks to Parviz, Shiva, and Lisa. I think what was interesting for me was the impetus of behind the show and seeing how the works had perhaps not been treated so well back in Tirana. And I hope after this exercise there will be a whole review of this situation. And it's been an absolute joy to hear you speak about your work as a real artist. I think it's a great pleasure to have you here tonight. So thank you all very, very much. Thank you.